Wake up! It's the Sleep Unplugged podcast with Dr. Chris Winner, episode 28, The 9 P's of Insomnia. Welcome, everyone, to the Sleep Unplugged podcast. My name is Dr. Chris Winner. I'm a neurologist and sleep specialist. If you're new to the Sleep Unplugged podcast family, welcome. If you're a veteran, welcome back. This is the first episode of 2023, which is very exciting. And for those of you who are familiar with the podcast, we always start the first Monday of every month with an episode about insomnia. So it just so happens that the first episode of 2023 falls on such a Monday, and we're doing our next episode on insomnia. So we're very excited about that. Just some housekeeping before we get going. We always start the show off with comments, corrections, criticisms. Had a couple comments from some listeners. One who's known very well to the show, Karen Johnson, who actually won one of the awards we gave out on the final episode of the 2022 season, wrote in and said, just listen to the narcolepsy episode. One thing that I would highlight is that most narcoleptics actually don't sleep longer than the normal amount for their age. Might be much longer than their sleep deprived peers. They just can't control their sleep wake stabilization. And that's a great comment from Karen. She's at Sleepy Karen if you want to follow her. And it's sort of a nice distinction between those individuals who have narcolepsy and those individuals who have what we call idiopathic hypersomnia, where these individuals sleep a lot, or there's even a condition we call called Klein-Levin, where individuals sleep a lot. It's like, sleep tremendous amounts and wake up just to eat and engage in some inappropriate behavior at times. It's a very unusual and rare condition. I'm sure we'll talk about sort of rare sleep conditions in an upcoming episode. But I appreciate Karen for talking about that. We talked a lot about destroying myths about narcolepsy patients in that episode. That was episode 26. One of those myths that we need to destroy is that narcolepsy patients sleep a lot. They're not sleeping a lot. They're just lacking that control of their sleep. And so what we talked about in the episode where they should be awake, their wakefulness is punctuated by sleep. Their sleep is often punctuated by wakefulness. So we're going to do another episode on narcolepsy in the future and really get into treatments about that and talk more about that. But I appreciate Karen for adding in her valuable insight and expertise. Had another comment from Joe. I posted a little diagram of different sleeping configurations of clothing on my Instagram page, and it was like, do you wear pants and boxers, or shirt and boxers, or just a shirt, or just boxers? And Joe thought that the shirt or bra with no pants was a little strange, and so I posted a funny picture of I guess Donald Duck, Donald Duck, who always wears the sailor top and hat but no pants, and said he was a big fan of number 5. And I had several people say, is that your sleep configuration? And it is not my sleep configuration. I am not a number 5. Just wanted to clear that up. And finally, Manny wrote in and said, about the Trucker Hat Awards, it's a great award that you're giving to the people who won the awards in episode 27. But are you concerned that because people can buy the trucker hat, that there will be imposter award winners? I don't have his email or his DM in front of me, but it was hilarious. Yeah, I guess I am concerned about that, but we have made the winners of the 2022 Sleep Unplugged Awards pretty public. So, if you notice a young child walking around with the Sleep Unplugged trucker hat, or somebody that doesn't look like Brandon Peters or Anne-Marie Morse or Diane Macedo, then I guess that's an imposter. But maybe that's what the Academy Awards should do. Just sell Oscars. You pay a certain amount of money, you get your Oscar with your name on it, and you can have one on your mantle as well too. So I'm willing to tolerate individuals who have the trucker hat who have not won the award, because the people who won the 2022 Sleepy Award know who they are. And just mentioning, if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, we gave out truckers hats with the Sleep Unplugged logo on them in episode 27. That was the 2022 Sleep Awards. I had some leftovers. I said, look, if you DM me your address and Venmo me $25, I'll send you a Sleep Unplugged trucker hat. And we still have a few left over if somebody's interested. So thank you all for communicating with the show. If you would like to communicate with the show and find out if Donald Duck and I share the same nighttime outfit, you can do it through my Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. It's all Dr. Chris Winter. That's DrChrisWinter. You can follow me and DM me for the quickest way to communicate with me in the show. We do have a YouTube page that I don't think has gotten 100 subscribers yet, but I just wanted to let people know I do put all the videos of the podcast on that platform if you like to watch your content rather than simply listen to it. And it's fun for like the gift giving guide 22 and some other things if you want to watch it. So that's YouTube. Just type in Sleep Unplugged. So let's get into the 9 P's of insomnia. If you're familiar with some behavioral treatments for insomnia, you may be familiar with the 3 P's of insomnia. I became familiar with the 3 P's of insomnia when I was an undergrad. I read Charles Morin's book, Insomnia. Charles Morin is I consider to be sort of a god of behavioral insomnia therapy. When you write the book just called Insomnia, you probably know what you're doing. And he wrote about the 3 P's in that book. The 3 P's actually referred to Arthur Spielman's work. He was a professor up at City University of New York. He wrote in 1987 a paper in psychiatry clinics or annals of psychiatry, I can't remember which one, about the behavioral model for insomnia. And it was the 3 P's. And I think everybody who treats insomnia utilizes it in some way or another. And I wrote about it extensively in my first book, The Sleep Solution: Why Your Sleep is Broken and How to Fix It. And what the 3 P's are sort of a way of sort of configuring how an individual with insomnia comes to be. And the 3 P's are predisposition, an individual who's sort of predisposed to having insomnia, type A personality, perfectionist, maybe struggles with anxiety. We'll get into some other things as well too. May not necessarily cause the insomnia, but they're getting that individual sort of primed for, there's another P, primed for it. And that individual sort of lives their life, and suddenly the second P happens, which is a precipitation, meaning that some event, or you could sort of pinpoint a time when it happened. And for a lot of people, they can pinpoint that precipitation. It was the divorce. It was their job loss. It was a difficult semester in school. It may have been an illness or some sort of psychiatric sort of exacerbation, a big panic attack, a bout of depression or panic and anxiety, etc. So most people can kind of pinpoint that, if not the reason, the divorce, the time period. Well, I don't remember anything really happening, but sometime about 2 years ago, I just started struggling with my sleep. And it can be as simple as that. And that's why when I work with individuals or teams, I'm being brought into an organization to talk about sleep, we want to head this off before the precipitant happens. Divorces will happen. Job losses will happen. Illnesses will happen. So it's, I'm sort of king of analogies, I think, for good or bad. It's sort of like maybe a Major League Baseball pitcher coming into an organization, and the strength and conditioning coaches, the physical therapists, all the athletic trainers, they're working to strengthen that pitcher's shoulder joint, elbow, work on their mechanics, work on, certain stretches and strength building exercises, dynamic range of motion things that they can do in an effort to protect that shoulder and keep the injury from ever happening. And that's what we do with insomnia all the time, when we work with groups like that. Hey, most of you sitting in front of me today in this lecture hall, in this clubhouse, wherever, are not experiencing insomnia right now. But for some unknown population, it's coming. It's going to happen. In fact, I think we've all gone through periods of sleeplessness before, and we've talked in previous episodes, well, what's the difference between a period of sleeplessness and insomnia? A lot of it has to do with interpretation and some of the other P's that we're going to talk about. So by understanding precipitations and predispositions, you can hopefully prevent the insomnia from happening and for it being perpetuated, which is the third P. So we have sleepless nights, we have periods of insomnia. Why, for some people, does it just last a few days, and as mysteriously as it came, it goes away for those people, versus other people who years after the precipitating event are struggling with their insomnia and trying to get back to where they were before it all happened. So those are the three P's by Arthur Spielman. I believe they're sublime. Nobody should mess around with them. Believe me, I'm not trying to introduce the 9 P's. This is just really more of kind of a fun episode and a fun exercise. The 3 P's are perfect. So I feel like I'm bastardizing what was sort of like taking tiramisu and putting like a hard chocolate covering over, like that easy shell or magic shell for, it's a perfect dessert, and you screwed it up. Or iced coffee. That's my soapbox statement. Who would put ice in a coffee? I just don't get that. Maybe I'll put a poll up on the Instagram and figure out what the Sleep Unplugged audience's feel is on iced coffee. I think it's a terrible thing to do to a perfectly good cup of joe. So what are the 9 P's of insomnia? Well, I think about this a lot, that when you deal with a lot of patients with insomnia, and we see a lot of them, there are some other things along that process that sort of stick out. And I thought it would be fun to see how many kind of P's we could assign to the process. So the 9 P's of insomnia are going to keep the 3 P's that Arthur Spielman, Dr. Spielman, put together, and we're going to add a few of our own just as talking points. Just as a note, Dr. Spielman died in 2015, and it was a big loss to the sleep community. And I think one episode we'll have to do at some point in the future is to sort of tell stories about the old guard of sleep. I mean, every time I go around and travel and meet some of these people, it's just amazing. They were doing sleep studies in the basement, and they were rigging up equipment and doing it kind of on the side. And that's how this little tiny lab started. And it's now a 38-bed sleep center with residents and fellows. And so all those little origin stories are really cool. Maybe we'll talk about Arthur and some other people who really set the stage for sleep in the future. All right, so let's get going with our 9 P's. So we've already introduced P number 1, that's predisposition. The people who are sort of set up, maybe who are more likely to have insomnia than those who are not. And we talked a little bit about who those might be. And the second P that I wanted to add after predisposition was, and I'm not even sure if this is a word or not, preindoctrination. And so what do I mean by that? Preindoctrination to me is, we're all born and we all grow up in households, and the households that we are exposed to vary. Some people are households very religious. Others don't go to church a day in their life. Some households, no video games allowed. Other people, you can have any video game you want. Nobody really cares. And you get a cell phone when you're 5 years old. So a lot of this comes down to maybe the 10th P, parenting. But I felt like pre-indoctrination was a better word, because it's beyond parenting. It's really about themes that you're trying to sort of evolve with your children. And if one of the things that a child is exposed to when they're really young is you've got to fall asleep fast, you've got to go to sleep now, and if you don't, either bad things will happen or you'll get into trouble, you're already starting to kind of create a maybe less than healthy relationship with sleep. And maybe the best analogy that I could think about that might be with food. Did you grow up in a place where you could eat and drink pretty much anything you wanted to? Some families literally have the 3 liters of soda on the table, and that's their choice. That's their style. That's their method. That they don't worry about that. Other people, you're not really allowed to drink sugar drinks, or whatever. And so it's always interesting to talk to not only families and parents of young kids, but really adults, and ask them, what was the conversation about sleep in general, or your sleep, like when you were young? And it's very common for individuals who struggle with their sleep to have had very rigid, high, sometimes unrealistic expectations about their sleep put on them. The other thing that you often see is individuals who struggle with their sleep had parents who struggled with their sleep. So you can imagine, as this young person is growing up, hearing things from mom or dad. Couldn't sleep last night. Man, the sleeping pills did not work for me last night. So whether it's great information or terrible information about sleep, the child is hearing this. And hearing a parent be upset about the fact that they could not sleep, or watching a parent use alcohol in order to help them sleep, and say it. Well, I just, mommy likes to have a little special drink at night to help her sleep. These things are very common. And so that pre-indoctrination becomes extremely important. And there was actually a pretty interesting study. It was a Swiss study. It was a Swiss study from 2017. Dr. Maurer and Dr. Lamola basically showed that how sleeplessness affects adults tended to affect not only a child's mental health, but also the way they slept as well too. So it was very interesting. Particularly maternal sleeping habits seem to strongly influence the development of insomnia in their kids. And I don't think that should really be a big surprise to much of anyone. And, there have been studies looking at the genetics of insomnia, whatever that means. Insomnia is such a multifaceted, it's sort of like the genetics of being nice or the genetics of being athletic. Well, that athleticism embodies a tremendous amount of variables, processing speed and muscular build and fatigability, there's all kinds of things. So I think that pre-indoctrination is something we always want to think about. And one of the things that I do with my patients is, tell me about your mom, tell me about your dad, or tell me about your moms, tell me about your dads, single mom, single dad, grandparents, whoever raised you. And what was the dialogue about sleep like? We never talked about it. We could sleep as late as we wanted. We could stay up as late as we wanted. Or, I had a patient tell me one time, grew up in a very religious household, that it was sort of sinful to be up late or to sleep in late. That was not allowed. Or maybe you grew up on a farm where you had chores. So it's always interesting to see the kernels of where these kind of things start. So as you think about, if you're somebody who struggles with insomnia, glad you're here. Hope this is helpful. I want you to think about your relationship with sleep, not insomnia, your relationship with sleep, and what it was like growing up. Was it positive? Was it negative? I think I did mention in my second book, The Rested Child, and I've probably mentioned on the show that I have 3 children, and as we raised them, when they were quite young, we told them, look, you can go to bed whenever you want to. We think sleep's very important and it's good for you to get sleep, but You'll decide when it's time to turn the light out and put your book away. We didn't allow screens in the bedroom. But they had art supplies and trading cards and Matchbox cars and Polly Pockets. My daughter's very into the psychology of empathy, and you were talking about different toys and how they resonated with her when she was a child and the toys that didn't. And so if you have some Polly Pockets, that was a resonant toy when she was young. Great, you can play with your Polly Pockets. So, and when you're ready to go to sleep, you go to sleep. So there was no pressure from us. You're not going to get sick. You're not going to fail your test. You're not going to get into trouble. Just do it when you're ready to do it. And we'll take care of making sure you get up on the other end and sort of move forward from there. So that's pre-indoctrination. We have talked about the number 3P, precipitation. Something happens. We're not going to belabor that. And again, you may be aware of what that was. You may not. That's okay. I think the 4th P, which is really important, is panic, meaning that the divorce happens. You have some difficult nights sleeping. How do you interpret that? Is it, well, yeah, I had some bad nights sleeping because this person I've spent so much time with and I've cared so much about, our relationship, our union is falling apart. And this is very upsetting to me. And that's making it difficult for me to effectively sleep quickly or stay asleep now. I've got a lot on my mind, but it'll pass. Or do all of the alarms go off? And that initial panic or that perpetuated panic is very important, because without it, it doesn't really work. Again, we can go to a sports analogy. You're in a baseball game, you've struck out once. How do you approach the second at bat against that pitcher? Are you full of confidence? Oh, that was kind of weird. I can hit this guy. And you approach or is it, oh, this guy's going to strike me out again. I know it. He's so good. He throws the ball so hard. There's no way I can, like, I don't know what to do. I don't have the skills to hit this guy's change, whatever. Like, how are you approaching that situation? And panic, sorry, my elbow's killing me right now. Panic is important. So one of the things we want to do in talking to people about their sleep, both individuals struggling with insomnia and people who are not, is let them know, hey, sleepless nights are coming. It's going to happen. Hopefully the divorce doesn't happen. Hopefully the job loss doesn't happen. But you are going to have nights where you don't sleep well. And we could throw another P in here. We've talked about parents. That's sort of number 10. Here's P number 11 is a plan. What's your plan for tonight? If you're not an insomnia patient and you're listening to this podcast, there's another P, podcast. You don't fall asleep right away, or you struggle to fall asleep tonight. You're like, wow, this podcast has really got my mind cranking. I'm really struggling to fall asleep at night. What's your plan? And in that way, once again, we are sort of heading off the chronicity of the problem because it's expected and it's coming. And again, to borrow that baseball analogy, if you're a professional baseball player, you're going to strike out a lot. So I don't think you make it to the Padres. We're really going to go full in on the P's tonight. I don't think you make it to the Padres without having a plan for what you're going to do when you go 0 for 4 in a game. That is part of the deal. And, we talk about the yips and was it Steve Blass, the pirate, another P, who forgot how to throw a ball. He panicked. He made a couple bad throws to the pitcher, a couple bad throws to the first base on pickoff moves, and the panic got so bad, he literally could not throw a baseball. And we call it the yips now. So the panic is something we need to avoid. Easier said than done. P number 5 is pills. I'm not going to get into that too much. If you want to listen to what I think about sleeping pills, that would be in episode 11. But that's the easy fix, right? Imagine you've gone through the first 4 P's now. You're a little bit anxious to begin with. Been, told all of your life sleep is extremely important, as is fiber. You grew up in a family where sleep and fiber were king. And something bad happened. You struggled in college and failed a couple classes, and Your third semester at the school of your dreams just did not go well. And now your plans of going into law are falling apart. Your sleep is terrible and you are panicking. And so you go to student health. What's going to happen in student health, do you think? I think everybody knows what's going to happen in student health. They're going to read the panic and they're going to give you pills. That's what always happens. Because the person in student health has never really been trained by Dr. Arthur Spielman in terms of what insomnia is and models for its treatment and how we can approach this in a rational way that's lasting and meaningful. So pills number 5, you can find out more about that in episode number 11. So my next unique P is number 6, perception. And to me, perception creates the panic, right? If the perception is, I've had some difficulty sleeping, no big deal, I'm going to fall asleep. This happens to people all the time. I've got a great plan for this. This is not any big deal. Then my guess is the problem sort of dies right there. And we've talked a little bit, I always talk about Jenny Trauma Surgeon. Jenny Trauma Surgeon has a perception that as long as she gets 2 to 3 hours of sleep on call, she is completely good to go in terms of whatever trauma surgery opportunity presents itself on her call night. And we know that's not true. We know some people handle sleep deprivation better than others, but they're still wildly affecting their performance and probably heading to an earlier grave. And if you don't believe me, read Matt Walker's book. It's a essay on how wrong you are if you think you're succeeding getting 4 to 5 hours of sleep. Can you do it? That's a different question. So Ken Lickstein at the University of Alabama wrote an interesting paper back in 2017, and it was essentially how you feel about your sleep or how you feel about your insomnia is a better predictor of your health and the health consequences of insomnia than the way you actually sleep. And we've talked about that a lot. And that's important because, again, if you understand what that study shows, what you understand is that my interpretation of the insomnia is what's going to really hurt me. It's not the insomnia itself. And not only do patients not understand that, many doctors don't. Again, they're the pills. And that's a hard thing to say to the young budding law student who's at student health in a total panic, telling the doctor, I can't sleep. When I was an intern in the emergency room, I had an undergraduate student call 911 because he couldn't sleep. That's panic. And you're going to tell that person at 3:00 in the morning when they come into the emergency room, hey, there's this great paper in 2017 by this guy you've never heard about who said basically your fear of the insomnia is the bigger problem than you not sleeping or whatever sleep you are or are not getting. That's a conversation that has to be developed, right? That's why we are doing insomnia topics the first Monday of every month, because there's way too much to talk about and digest and feel our way through in 30 minutes. It's not going to happen. So perception is extremely important and probably the key to solving most people's insomnia. It's the plan and the perception. Tonight, I'm going to go to bed and something's going to happen. I'm going to sleep great or I'm not. Will I panic? No, that doesn't really bother me one way or the other. What is my perception? My perception is things happen, but overall, my sleep's going to be okay, and yours will too. So the 7th is perpetuation. That's one of Dr. Spielman's. That's the final of his three. And perpetuation is important because perpetuation comes from a lot of places. It comes from the individual, the people around the individual, the media. It also comes from doctors. I think doctors are absolutely to blame when it comes to perpetuation, because when you go back to student health and say this pill's not working, what happens? Well, we just got to give you better pills, right? There's better pills all the time. I was just watching a commercial with famous people who are talking to some, woman in a white coat who's got a little model of the brain saying, well, famous person, the reason why you can't sleep is because you've got chemicals in your brain that are creating wakefulness. And, okay, great. Famous person looks pretty good and has been wildly successful. So where's the pathology here? Like, what's going on? So that perpetuation is coming from everywhere. Got to get your 8 hours of sleep or you're going to get dementia. Fear, panic, it's coming at you. And there's a reason why. Insomnia is a huge business. It's a big business. I mean, we're talking about $6 billion by 2030, 2028. People are making a lot of money off of this. Nobody wants to hear what Ken has to say down. Hey, guys, everybody, don't worry so much about it. It's your fear of it that's the problem. It's not the actual insomnia. Nobody who's making drugs for insomnia wants to hear that. Nobody's making money on devices and apps and things want to hear that. So that perpetuation becomes really important. And we know it starts at a very young age. It was a great study. Dr. Fernandez, Julio Fernandez Mendoza basically said, look, when you look at insomnia, children with insomnia are often adults with insomnia. I mean, there's the ultimate perpetuation right there. You came to your parents when you were young and said, I'm struggling with my sleep and I'm having insomnia. And there's a very good chance that this is going to persist into your adulthood. This was a 2022 study by Dr. Mendoza. He's at Penn State. And the numbers are staggering. So anyway, it's just something to kind of think about, that a lot of adults with insomnia are kids with insomnia. That goes back to what we were talking about before, that predisposition, preindoctrination. What were you thinking about when you were young and having difficulty with your sleep? I can tell you what I was thinking about. I remember horribly sleepless nights, thinking they would never end. It was kind of torturous. And that leads to number 8. P number 8 is pain. And we talked a lot about that in episode number 6. I'm not going to beat that to death, but it's painful. It's traumatic. And it's traumatic for a lot of reasons. It's traumatic because you believe it's impairing your health. It's traumatic because people in periods of sort of utter honesty will say, I'm scared to be there in the dark doing nothing for hours. It's like a teacher putting you in the corner and saying, okay, in first period, Chris, you're talking too much. Go to the corner. That never happened, but let's imagine that it did. I was such a goody two shoes. Plus both my parents were teachers and had the teachers back. So one phone call from teacher to Bill or Sally Winter would not have been great. So I was always nervous to cross any teacher because they all knew each other. But imagine, okay, Chris, go to the corner. You've been talking too much to your buddy there, Sean, and so you're standing in the corner. And what the teacher said, well, Chris, you were so bad today. We're going to leave you there all day. Stand there all day or sit all day, but just stare at that concrete wall the whole day. That's kind of tortuous. So pain is a big problem. Psychological pain, PTSD kind of pain. There is a pain that goes along with insomnia, and it feeds the panic fire for sure. And I think that leads to number 9, pessimism and powerlessness. I couldn't decide between those two words. I like them both. And you can see it everywhere. And the place where you can really, if you really want to see it, is pick a book. I've mentioned several great books on this. I've got a book, The Sleep Solution, Why Your Sleep's Broken and How to Fix It, which is pretty blunt in places, especially about insomnia. So take a look at the Amazon page for that book, and you'll see that's got some rankings, 4.4 stars or whatever it happens to be right now. Which click on the rankings, and then it allows you to look at just the 5-star reviews, which I'm incredibly thankful for that anybody ever takes the time to write a review of my book. And there's a lot of them. And it's interesting. I want you to read some 5-star reviews first. I want you to get a sense of the language they use, the tone, the emotion behind them, upbeat, clear, seeing things clearly for the first time, optimistic. Oh my God, this has just opened my eyes to this, and I've never thought about it in this way. So when you read it, you'll 2 or 3 reviews, you'll get it. Now I want you to go to the 1-star reviews of the book. I want you to read those. I want you to think of the words powerlessness and pessimism. These people are hurt. They've been let down, and they are looking for something that is to some degree magical, and they're not finding it. And when they read the book, and you can see this in a lot of reviews of books about sleep that I like, they're nothing new here, or don't waste your money. There's nothing new in her book about insomnia. Well, of course there's not, because Arthur Spielman figured it out in 1987, and others have too. So this idea that somebody's going to write a book that says, put your feet up in the air, hold your breath for 13 seconds, like hiccup treatments. Take a brown bag, breathe into it 7 times, then close the bag up, fold it 3 times over, stick it under your pillow. Like, come on. But that's what they're looking for, because they're upset, they're angry, and they don't believe anymore. They are hurt by the condition and don't want to hear that, hey, it's not that bad, or hey, it's been under your power the whole time, or hey, you're sleeping just not the way you want to. Like, this is not at all what they want to hear. And unfortunately, until they can hear it one way or the other, they're going to struggle. So anyway, that's it. There are the 9 P's. We'll go through them one more time. Predisposition. That was the original. Preindoctrination. That's new. Precipitation, an original. Panic, new. Pills, new. Perception, new. Perpetuation, original. Pain, new. Pessimism, powerlessness, new. So that's it. Those are some things I want you to mull over if you're struggling with insomnia. Think about, let me know how they land. Give me a DM or a text. If you want to, and again, you can do that through Dr. Chris Winter, Twitter, Dr. Chris Winter, Instagram, Dr. Chris Winter, TikTok. You can watch this on our YouTube channel. My books, The Sleep Solution, Why Your Sleep's Broken and How to Fix It, as well as The Rested Child, Why Your Tired, Wired, or Irritable Child may have a sleep disorder and how to help. And I would say to parents out there, if you've got kids, think about the way you're talking about sleep right now. You may be creating some fantastic sleepers of the future. If you want to buy a trucker hat with the Sleep Unplugged logo, still got a few left, just DM me and we'll work it out. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you very much for supporting the show. Until next week, sleep well.